we're in this little town, and you need to meet Senora, we'll say Jones for the audience. Senora
Sure.
Jones, she was actually alive during the war. Holy cow! Let's go talk to her. And the next thing I know, we're going to all these little towns because she's like, Steve, I need you to meet somebody. And we're dragging the camera crew, and all of a sudden I'm going, Adele, this isn't just about the partisans. This is much bigger.
What, is the core of this film? What was your motivation? Because it's not easy to do what you did.
No, that's actually a great question. And interestingly enough, this movie was kind of the result of the first movie that we did, Fidelta, because when I went to Italy, I was invited over there to speak about the first film. And basically, while I was there, they were kind enough to take me up to Abruzzo, where I met some local historians. And they were kind of walking me through things like, the Gustav line and the partisan movement. I said, well, this is really interesting. And then when I went back to the States, I guess this was like late 2024. So now it's early 2025. And I'm like, I'm looking for a new project this year. And I just happened to have stayed in touch with one of the local historians. And she said, what a great idea. It's the 80th anniversary of World War II's ending, and we're going to have all these things. And I said, perfect, because I'm thinking of doing something about the partisans, which actually was the original intent of the movie, but that ends up being just kind of a subplot in the film. But that's basically where the idea came from. Just me having met folks, learning about the history of the Abruzzo region during the war, and then just saying, wouldn't that be a neat little film for 2025? And the next thing I know, I'm in Abruzzo filming.
I have been told from my brothers, or one of them, that people, maybe my grandparents, have come from that area when they, immigrated into the United States, and a lot ended up in Bloomfield, Pittsburgh in general. Do you find that's the case?
So, great question. And the short answer is yes. There are a lot of people in a Pittsburgh region that come from the Abruzzo region in Italy. And again, it all comes down to poverty. The places in Italy where there was significant poverty is where they left from. That's why you see a lot of people say, I'm from Calabria, I'm from Abruzzo. Those two regions, for whatever reason, seem to be heavy. Fun fact, in Bloomfield, I don't know if you remember the Adelaida Club.
Sure.
So all the people that
Absolutely.
came from the town of Adelaida, which is in Abruzzo, they basically picked up, moved, came and settled in Bloomfield, and then started a club. And originally, it was like you had to be from the town, because I mean, imagine you got a whole street, and you're all neighbors, and all of a sudden, one person from each house gets up and moves and comes to America. We're going to go. Let's go to Pittsburgh. Next thing you know, they're neighbors now in Bloomfield. And so it is very, very common to meet people in the Pittsburgh area from the Abruzzo. Well, and that's the key. Is like I said, we the more you learn when you go back in time, the more you learn. Not only do you get the why of why they left, but you also get the significance of them leaving. You see, you figure a lot of those people left around World War One, right before World War One, maybe right after World War One. So now you put that in perspective, and you say when they came over, they still had family members who remained. Well, in the 30s, now you've got late 20s, 30s, you got Mussolini, and then not too long, you're into the war. So the people that are coming from these towns, the family that they left over there in Italy and the Abruzzo region are now in the middle of the war. They're in the middle of the fighting. So now you have people that are from that region. And now this really kind of hits home. Now you might have someone whose grandfather was a great grandfather now, considering how old we're getting. Grandfather, great grandfather who immigrated from, say, Adelaide, say back in the 20s, plus or minus a few years. And their family stayed there. And then you're realizing their family's in the middle of the fighting. And now it is possible that grandfather or great grandfather that came from Adelaide may have been in the U.S. military fighting over in that region. So now you put it all together, and it just gets such a spider web. It's just so convoluted that now it really hits home, because obviously my grandfather fought in the war. His siblings came from Italy, but he was born here in the States, but his siblings were born in Italy. So obviously his parents came from Italy, came from that region. And so now imagine you're going back over there, and your parents came from that region, and now you're possibly in that area fighting, and you don't know who's on the other side. Now, by then, you were essentially fighting the German troops, because 43, the Italians surrendered. But you still had Allied bombing going on. So now the people flying the bombs that are bombing the German positions are also killing Italian civilians. So it really, when people step back and don't understand it, when they think of their relatives they come over, we so quickly forget the relatives that didn't come over. And therein is the problem. We understand the heartbreak that was going on at that time for a lot of those people.
Yeah. Now your military background, I mean, you know, I know, but for people who don't know, you pretty much came out of high school, went to the graduation, they pulled you off the stage and threw you on a plane. You didn't even you didn't even go back to Bloomfield to party. But now, does that background, was that motivation? Do you think you would have done this if you weren't in the military, or was that, you know?
That's a great question. Actually, I would say there's a part yes to that, and I'll tell you why. I've always been fascinated with military history. And World War II is, I don't know what it is from our generation, but I feel like our generation was really had some kind of, I don't want to call it an affinity, but I'll call it some kind of more than normal interest. Like in any part of history, it seems like World War II seems to be the one that we're most interested in. And I don't know, maybe, that's just because it was such a great, cataclysmic event, and we're not that far removed from it. I'm born in the early 70s. I think you're born right around the same time. So for us, you say less than 25 years earlier, the world war, the world's at war, major war, just finishing a major world war. Millions of people are killed. So for whatever reason it is, that had such an impact on us because out of World War II comes the Cold War. It is a direct result of World War II. So if you grew up in the 70s and 80s, you remember the Cold War, but you also knew the why of the Cold War, which was World War II. So I think that affinity of history, and particularly that we weren't that far removed from such major events, especially speaking for myself, it was always something I was very interested in. So having the opportunity to kind of go learn about, this, I do think that Italy is a forgotten part of World War II. And and so for me, it was near and dear to my heart to really go fill in some gaps of major fighting. I mean, you knew about Sicily, you knew about Anzio, and maybe you've heard about the Gustav line, or maybe you've heard of the Battle of Monte Cassino. But what you didn't hear was that was 9 months of fighting, not a couple of battles, and it was over. It was everything from Monte Cassino over to Ortona, on the other side of the boot. They were fighting all along this line, and there were so many countries involved. And then by then the Italians had surrendered, so now you've got partisan movement. It was major fighting that often gets overshadowed because, well, what happens? D-Day happens. Okay, forget everything that happened before D-Day. D-Day was like the turning point of the war. But yes and no, because if we would have had captured Rome earlier, maybe we're flying bombers out of Rome and marching northward up the boot instead of having to land in France. I mean, you don't know what the changes would have been, but people don't know about that 9 months of fighting.
Right, they
It's kind of
lock in
like
on
the way
that
people don't
D-Day,
remember
right?
Korea.
Yeah.
It's forgotten.
Yeah. Now, I mean, obviously, you traveled to Italy to film these people. I mean, to interview these people, correct? I mean, I'm
Correct.
assuming. I'm assuming
Yep.
that's what you had to do. Now, how did you pick these people?
Great question. So remember that historian I told you I met a couple of years ago?
Right. Yeah. Sure.
I She was she's very well renowned on the Gustav line and the partisan units because she's from that area. So it's been a lifelong, labor of love for her. And so she was introducing me to people that they had personally known that had where their family members were significant impacts on, say, for example, the partisan movement. So if you watch the film, you see some of the subtitles. I know sometimes it's a little hard to read; it's in Italian, but you'll see words. You'll either see word for survivor in Italian, or you'll see, family member of. So it started off to be the partisan movement because that was her labor of love. But then she's like, we're in this little town, and you need to meet Signora, we'll say Jones for the audience. Signora Jones, she was actually alive during the war. Holy cow! Let's go talk to her. And the next thing I know, we're going to all these little towns because she's like, Steve, I need you to meet somebody. And we're dragging the camera crew, and all of a sudden I'm going, Adele, this isn't just about the partisans. This is much bigger. And having actual eyewitnesses to that 9 months, it completely changed what the original film intent was going to be. So it was sort of like I went in there with an idea to film a partisan movement based on her expertise, but her friendships and awareness of all these people ended up completely flipping the script on both of us for that week. It was a very long week.
Okay.
We
All
would
right.
go to different towns, sometimes twice, 2 times in the same day, and we were lugging that equipment.
Now, who helped you? If you want to give a shout
I had a
out to.
couple of cameramen. Peyton Hostetler is a wonderful student here at Robert Morris University, and Joe Hale is my engineer, actually, for my podcast. And Joe has 30 plus years in the business, and Peyton is just one of those absolutely gifted, gonna do great things in the industry. So the three of us went there and did the filming and the interviews. Literally everything from drone footage to having the audio, video, and obviously, I don't want to. I'm sure if somebody's done film, they're going to yell at me what I'm about to say. But look, believe it or not, the filming is the easy part. It's the post production is everything, because you can put the cameras and get the lighting to the best of your ability. But I'll give you one good example. We were doing an interview, and if you watch the film, there's an interview where a gentleman's sitting on the steps, and you'll see the steps behind him. Well, what you don't hear is like the 10,000 cicadas chirping all around us, because post-production sound engineer did an absolutely fantastic job of taking all of that out. So when you're filming, you're like, I know the lighting's not that great. I know the sound isn't that great. But you're like, I'm going to just trust that post-production is everything. So for us, we would just go there. I had a couple of canned questions, but I'll say one thing about what I do in my documentaries. My documentaries are about you, the person getting interviewed, not about me. So it was a long week, but it was a fun week. It was fantastic.
Now, so start to finish, as far as the film, what time frame are we talking? A couple years?
No, I'll tell you what. Let me tell you something about me. This is why I hope that if one of your listeners needs anything on film and need it quick, you call me, because I have literally what I think is an absolute A+ team.
Okay.
I started talking with Adele about doing something in probably January of February of 2025. We were filming in the summer because I took a couple of months to kind of lay out my ideas, my thoughts. Again, we completely changed the script after the interviews. When I went to Italy, we were doing A. By the time we left Italy, it was B. And so we came back, and our post-production was maybe 3 months. We actually went back to Italy in December to show the first iteration of the film. And we were in a oh my goodness, I can't remember what it was. It was this beautiful palace. And it had a huge room, and they put the film in. We had a couple of mayors were there, some dignitaries. I think there was an ex-ambassador there, the local senator, I think, was there. A lot of folks from the area, family members. So we went from idea January, February to first version in December. And then, probably by February, March, it was being entered in film competitions. And the awesome thing was, I remember I put it in the Los Angeles Italia film. And I mean, literally the next day, I got an email saying, your film has been accepted. I'm like, oh, we've got a winner then. Because getting into anything in Los Angeles is a big deal.
Sure,
So
sure.
getting into the Italia, to be accepted into the Los Angeles Italia Film Awards was a huge thing for us. So again, that was roughly a year from idea to congratulations, you're accepted into a film festival. And so I'm thinking Innocenti is a little more, it's a little less what I'll call historical and a little more emotional. You see, Fidelita was a
I agree.
great historical documentary. A, B, C, D, E. And you throw in people's reflections on those moments.
Well, tell us about that one, because that's kind of when you go to your website, that's the
That's the main one.
promo that comes
Yeah.
up, sucks you right in. What the story behind that?
So that was one of those, just freaks of nature. And ironically enough, it started, you go back to my Bloomfield days, because, you remember when there were actual old time Italians on the corners still, blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah, in
Oh,
the old
yeah.
dialects. When I
Mhm.
retired from the military and finally came back to Pittsburgh after a few years, and I kind of got reinvigorated to learn Italian. I was able to meet probably one of the, what I'll call one of the, that generation, Joe D'Andrea. And it was him that introduced me to different stories of Italian, cultural things. For example, like the Manong mining accident, the prisoners in Letterkenny, which was the film. Didn't even know about the Italian portion of the Heinz History Center. So all of these Italian cultural things that are in Southwest PA, I grew up here. I know nothing about them. So that then sparked my interest. And after Joe dies, that sparks my interest to, kind of reflect on these things. And then learning that there was an actual prisoner of war camp 3 hours from Pittsburgh. And I will tell you, most people from Pittsburgh have no idea. They have no idea that there was a prisoner of war camp. People in Chambersburg, some of them, especially the older ones, kind of said, well, I remember something about that, but they didn't know the details. So that turned into one of these. And I mean, literally, listen, I'm telling you, I literally thought I was going to show up with a camera, film this old chapel, and maybe interview a couple of people about the chapel. I was flabbergasted to know there's an entire association dedicated to preserving the memory of the prisoners that were in this chapel. So Fidelta started off with just camcorder idea, a little YouTube video, and turns into an international award-winning documentary. And listen, I don't say that like cocky. I mean, I say that like I'm like, I didn't see that coming. I had no idea. I cannot tell you how humbled and blessed I am from that. And then just to show you the strange paths of life, showing that film in Italy. So when we went back to show Fidelta, we went to Rome and Milan, because Milan is where that association is headquartered out of. And we went to Rome because a lot of the family members were from the South, and we didn't want to make them travel up to Milan. So we said, okay, we'll do it in Rome. So we worked with Notre Dame. The Notre Dame has a campus in Rome. So we worked with them, and then they showed it there. And so the thank you was, hey, why don't you go to Abruzzo, and we've got a surprise. You're going to meet some of your relatives that you've never met. Oh, and by the way, we're going to introduce you to some local historians. Next thing I know, that then turns into Innocenti. So the paths for all of this, to your point, yeah, some of it goes back to military, but some of it goes back even further than that, just to those, at the time, they didn't matter. In hindsight, those memories are everything. They're everything about who we are. I mean, tell me you don't miss those old guys on the street going, oh, Casadich, oh, you're thinking, at the time, you're like, God, these guys are annoying. Shut up. And now you're like, man,
I mean, I'm ready to do a doc on Bloomfield itself. It's how much I miss that backstory. Working on anything?
I can't sit still. And we're in post-production of a documentary on St. Clement of Rome. And again, you talk about these weird paths. Well, once in a while, I do a podcast called the Unlikely Catholic Podcast. And we had a guest on there, Mike Aquilina, wonderful person, wonderful man, very, very smart. And I sent him the Fidelta, and I said, hey, Mike, I'm really interested in the early church fathers. You're an expert. Here's a film I did recently. Let me know. He calls me back and says, I like it. I'm interested. So we're in post-production on that. I think I have one more interview to do. And then, God willing, hopefully in the next 2 months, that one will be ready to put out.
Now, what's it called again? I'm sorry.
It's just going to be called St. Clement of Rome. There is a lot of history in the church that's not just, take it or leave it. You know what I mean? It's actual historical, like proven history. And those early church fathers, there's actually a basilica in Rome, the Basilica of St. Clemente. And it actually, there's multiple, like a lot of the buildings in Rome. You have the Middle Ages, basilica that's there. But then underneath there was an older church. It goes back to, I think, the 400s. Then underneath there was a home. And underneath there is the pagan ruins. And the significance is they think that's where St. Clement either lived or celebrated Mass. So again, there's a historical element to that. Now, will that have a faith element to it? Absolutely, because you're going to have to ask yourself a question. Why do these people go to such potentially horrible deaths unless they really believe something? And since they weren't that far removed from the events that they were espousing, there's sort of a historical and a faith. You cannot deny it. They died for something, for some reason, and it wasn't hearsay. So I'm trying to do a very delicate job of not losing the historical, but saying, look, you can't deny the time frame of this person and what they did. There obviously something had to have happened,
Sure.
So I'll
Hmm.
put it in the reader's hands whether they want to accept that.
Hmm. Now, you mentioned podcasts. Are you still doing Italian Impact Weekly?
Don't hate me, but we renamed it. We call it Talking Business and Life, and because what we wanted to do
Hey,
was,
what's the matter, you?
we actually, because what happened was, ironically enough, most of our guests are Italian, but what we realized was we didn't want to say, and I don't say this in a mean way, but like I don't want to pigeonhole myself because I didn't want people that weren't Italian to think I can't watch this or I don't care, I'm not Italian. It's like you're kind of missing the point of the podcast. It's about bringing in people. Granted, most of them are Italian. Okay, it just worked. But we have people that are not Italian. What can I say? But the idea was we wanted to make sure that people like, all are welcome, children, come into the light. Claudio and I are still very much, celebrating our Italian American culture. And
Cool.
that's
Tell
not going to go
Claudio I
away.
said hello.
Absolutely, I
Definitely.
will.
Seriously, make sure.
Because I'm going to be talking to him in a very short while here. So
Good,
it'll be
good.
fresh on my mind.
So they want to watch the film. People want to see this film or both films. Did they go to your website? Well, how can they access this film or films?
Great question. You can go through my website, StephenManciniProductions.com. Now, I'm going to tell you something. Fidelta is available on Amazon, and it's also for free on YouTube. Now, I say that because I'm going to be honest. If you want to support future work that I'm doing, I ask you, go watch it on Amazon. It'll cost you a whopping 89 cents. But if you say, I hate Amazon, or I'm not paying for it, or whatever your excuse is, that's fine. It's available on YouTube. And I put Innocenti on YouTube. And the big reason why I wanted to put them out there was I want the Italians to see them. And what you find, this is kind of just a gee whiz for listeners. Amazon.com movies and videos cannot be accessed by other countries because of copyright and trade, on intellectual property rights.
Wait,
So believe it or not,
Amazon?
it's available
Amazon
on Amazon.
cannot? You're saying
Right.
Amazon?
So even though it's on Amazon Prime, Italians can't watch it. What I have to do is I have to go set up a business in Italy and put it on Amazon.it. And I said, you know what? It's more important that they get a chance to watch it than I make a nickel. So I encourage you to go out on Amazon Prime, watch Fidelta. I'll take your 48 cents when it's all said and done. But that's just helping me pay for, trying to keep doing this. I mean, I'm an independent filmmaker, and anything people want to do to help me, I appreciate it. But it's on YouTube. They're both on YouTube. And if you like it, my big ask, please, as we say, sharing is caring. So I encourage you to let other folks know it.
Most definitely. I will spread that word and that link and all that good stuff. But I really appreciate you coming on, Steve, again.
I appreciate you having me on. I still have a T-shirt and a mouse pad.
Oh, right. Yeah. We'll see what we can do.
On me, sir.
We'll see what we can do. But no, really, it's been great. Really enjoyed it.
I appreciate you, man.
You're listening to Unmuted with Papamutes.